welcome back to another episode, the second episode of State Takes. My name is Brett Stakey, and we have a very exciting podcast coming your way today. First of all, it's March 16th. It's Joel Embiid's birthday, 27th birthday, and also it's my birthday, 27th birthday. But apparently ESPN only gives a fuck about Joel Embiid and wishes him happy birthday and not me. But the biggest news coming out of Ames, Iowa, Steve Prohm is no longer the Iowa State coach. It happened last night. Obviously, I'm sure everyone knows. It's not a surprise whatsoever. After a 2-win season, it's hard to keep your job. But here's the question. Who is going to be the next coach of Iowa State? Everyone wants to know. Everyone's wondering. I'm wondering. It's the only thing I've been thinking about for a week. Well, a couple weeks. Actually, hell, an entire basketball season. So here it is. Who is going to replace Steve Prohm? So one name is sticking out among everyone else. It's TJ Otzelberger, UNLV, currently the head coach. Obviously an assistant for Fred Hoiberg. He was an assistant for Steve Prohm. He is from Wisconsin. He's married to arguably one of the best Iowa State women's basketball players of all time, Allison Lacey. He recruited George Niang. He recruited Monte Morris, Naz Long, Matt Thomas. Matt Thomas is a Wisconsin guy. Obviously, TJ's a Wisconsin guy. He's recruited big names, big names. He's also got a guy going to UNLV with the last name Kaluma. He ironically played, can't think of the league, AAU, thank you. He played AAU league in Des Moines one time. He's a 4-star recruit. He's a really, really good player. He is the, I believe, 42nd best player in the nation coming in. He's a power forward. He's 247 pounds, 6'8". And actually, I might have said that wrong. He's 6'8", 205 pounds. He reminds me a lot of a more athletic, bigger Jalen Coleman-Lands. He's a really good player, and I think if they could get this Arthur Kaluma to come in, obviously he's committed to UNLV right now, but if TJ comes in and gets this Kaluma kid, along with Tyrese Hunter, along with a healthy Xavier Foster, Regier Bolton's coming back. I think a projected lineup, if Arthur Kaluma does come in, is Tyrese Hunter, Regier Bolton, Jalen Coleman-Lands, if he comes back for 7th year. And honestly, I think if you got these 2 4-stars coming in, Jalen Coleman-Lands is coming in for his 7th year. And then, of course, you got a healthy Xavier Foster. On your bench, give or take, people leaving, people coming in. You got Tyler Harris. You got Javen Johnson. You got Trey Jackson. You got Jaden Walker. And potentially an old Cyclone that actually transferred to UNLV, maybe coming back, is Caleb Grill from Kansas, and Henson. Henson is the guy from Ole Miss that missed the entire year. And, of course, George Garbage Condit, which I don't care about George Condit if he comes or leaves. You got to remember, part of these guys might transfer. It wouldn't surprise me if Trey Jackson leaves. Caleb Grill obviously is not a guarantee he will come back. And George Condit, honestly, he could go back and play for my junior high team, and he might not even start. So, frankly, I don't give a shit about him. But if TJ Otzelberger comes in, and initially, he's the first name that people are thinking he's going to get hired. He's really young. Hasn't really proven himself at UNLV at all. South Dakota State, he had a decent recruiting class. I can't think of the kid's name, but they had that center or power forward who was really solid and led him to the NCAA tournament. I initially didn't think it was that sexy of a hire if it does happen. Also, Jamie Pollard and TJ are apparently best friends, and like almost in a weird way, it's sort of a man crush situation. But I think the more I looked into it, it almost seems like destiny. Obviously, he was a Freddie guy. He's married to an Iowa State women's basketball player. He's from Wisconsin, which is obviously close to Iowa. Well, borders Iowa. The more I thought of it, I thought this is sort of like destiny. Do I think he's the best person they can hire? No, because obviously, like I said, he hasn't proven himself. South Dakota State, he was all right. UNLV, he was all right at best. But if you get Kaluma to come in with Otzelberger, you get a healthy Xavier Foster. He maintains Tyrese Hunter, who, let's note, Tyrese Hunter is also from Wisconsin. And obviously TJ's from Wisconsin as well. You're looking at a team that is young for the most part, but mixed with some very older players. JCL, Jalen Coleman Lands, is obviously going to be in his 7th year if he comes back. Rozier Bolton is taking the COVID year, coming back. That'll be his 5th year. Xavier Foster, he got hurt last year, so I'm not sure if they'll give him a medical red shirt. I'm not sure if they did or not. And then Tyrese Hunter, he's a freshman. Like I said, Rozier Bolton is a 5th-year senior. Coleman Lands would be a 7th-year senior. Kaluma would be a freshman. Xavier Foster would either be a redshirt freshman or a sophomore. Tyler Harris, he's a transfer. Javen Johnson, he's a he'd be a sophomore. Trey Jackson, he would be a junior, and Jaden Walker, I believe, would be a sophomore. Caleb Grill would come in as a junior, I want to say, if he transferred. Let's just say that that's a big if. And Henson, I would assume he got a red shirt, so I think he'll be coming in as a junior. And George Condit, who gives a shit? I think he'll be a senior or a junior. I don't care. Frankly, I want him to either transfer or just quit. But if you take TJ Otzelberger, initially, like I said, I don't like it, but he has some decent assistants, and that's the biggest thing. Prohm's assistants were garbage. And if you have decent assistants, I think you have a chance. Currently, UNLV's assistant coaches are Tim Buckley, Kevin Kruger, and DeMarlo Slocum. Kevin Kruger, that is Oklahoma's coach, Lon Kruger's son. Keep in mind, Lon Kruger is probably going to retire within the next 5 years. And he's obviously Lon Kruger's son, Kevin Kruger. So I think Kevin Kruger will be getting some additional help from his father. Let's go here to Tim Buckley. He served as an NBA scout for the Minnesota Timberwolves for the last 2 years. He was also previously at Indiana under Tom Crean as an assistant coach. And then he was promoted to associate head coach during his 9 years in Indiana. Under his staff, the Hoosiers were nationally ranked, won Big Ten championships, made multiple NCAA tournament runs, and also recruited McDonald's All-Americans, obviously, and developed All-Americans who went on to the NBA, including my man, 2013 National Player of the Year, Victor Oladipo. I love Victor Oladipo. He is a stud. And obviously, like I said, Kyle Kruger, he played Kevin Kruger, Jesus. He played for UNLV when they made the Sweet 16. Definitely, like I said, obviously, Lon Kruger's son. That would be a pretty solid assistant coach. And then Slocum, he's a Las Vegas native, and he served as an assistant coach at Utah for the past 8 years until he obviously went to UNLV. They went to multiple NCAA tournaments, and he was also instrumental in the development of 3 NBA first-round draft picks while at the Pac-12 school, and he is also an El Dorado High School graduate and former head coach of the Las Vegas Prospects AAU team. So a lot of these guys have obviously some really solid backgrounds. Another assistant that I think maybe not this year because he's young and he's still pursuing an NBA career / G League career, is my absolute favorite player of all time, Nazareth Mitru Long, a.k.a. Naz Long, a.k.a. Threesis of Nazareth. I think he would be an absolute stud as an assistant coach. He hasn't had much luck, obviously, making the NBA. And, G League, I know you're still pursuing your dream, but do I think Naz Long will ever make the NBA? Unfortunately not. But as an assistant coach, as a guy that could recruit, Naz Long would be an absolute steal for an assistant coach for whoever the coach is, frankly. Because he's younger, he's been through the process, he's played for Iowa State in the glory days, he, has played a couple games for just a few seconds in the NBA, he knows what there is to it, and he's also the coolest guy in the world. Naz Long, mark my words, at some point will be either an assistant coach or a head coach of the Iowa State Cyclone basketball team. Mark my words. And that kind of leads me on to, if TJ Altenberger's not the guy, which don't get me wrong, I'm not against him not being the guy that they hire, who else will be a potential Iowa State coach? Everyone still has their obsession with Fred Hoiberg, which, don't get me wrong, like I said in the last podcast, if they hired Fred Hoiberg, I'd be up for it, but he will leave within 5 or 6 years. And do we really want to keep this process of hiring and firing new coaches 6 to 5 years? This will be Jamie Pollard's 4th head coach hire. So I think it's to a guy that you think is going to last a while and stay there for a long time. A big thing that's happened is the wives of these head coaches hate Ames, and they eventually talk their husbands into leaving, which, don't get me wrong, I know Ames isn't the sexiest town, but it's for a certain person. Steve Prohm, was a Southern guy, and he just didn't really fit in. I think being Midwestern, you got to have a mixture of being really polite in certain situations and also knowing the situations where you got to kind of step up and be an asshole. And frankly, Steve Prohm just didn't have that. And Freddie, I'm not saying was an asshole when he was at Iowa State, absolutely not. But he knew the times when he needed to push somebody or be on somebody's ass. And you see him now at Nebraska doing very un-Fred Hoiberg-like things, flipping out on players, throwing things, screaming at people, because I think his biggest thing now is he was used to smart players at Iowa State, and now he's dealing with some of the dumbest fucking players you've ever seen in your life. That's besides the point. I don't care about Nebraska or basketball, or football. But frankly, I think he can stew in failure at Lincoln because money brought him there, and that's all he cares about. And he'll sit there until the Kansas job gets open when Bill Self either, Kansas gets too big of heads and fires Bill Self, or his contract runs out, or whatever the case might be with Bill Self. He'll want to go to Kansas. But 5 years from now, if Nebraska hasn't had a above 500 season, why the fuck would Kansas want him? So Freddie kind of buried himself in his own grave, and he can stew in that, and I know a lot of Iowa State fans want him back. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind having him back, but how long are we going to have him back? I'm not against Fred Hoiberg coming in when he's 45 or 50 and past this, when he's ready to settle down and really commit to a team. He's kind of like a 21-year-old on Tinder. He's all over the fucking place. And he has commitment issues with every team he's at, including the team that, considers him an absolute god. So frankly, fuck Fred Hoiberg. Like I said, though, I'd still take him back in a heartbeat. But we don't have enough money to do it because, like I said in the last podcast, Matt Campbell is priority number one. Fred Hoiberg was the man. Guess what? Matt Campbell's the man now. So you can take a back seat if you want to be in Ames. But Fred Hoiberg's a dream that will not happen. And frankly, I think it's a bad dream. Otzelberger, I already mentioned. He's probably the most obvious one to hire. He has a career record of 96-58, and he's coached at South Dakota State and UNLV, like I said before. And he obviously runs a very similar offense as Fred Hoiberg. So, and I think he's actually a pretty good recruiter. I think he did most of the dirty work as far as recruiting for Fred Hoiberg. So frankly, TJ, the more I think about it, I'm starting to like more and more. Another guy that would be an absolute steal is Darian Devry from Drake University. He has a record of 69-28. He obviously led the Bulldogs to an NCAA tournament bid. I think, obviously he's from Des Moines. He's right down I-35. That would be a sort of sexy hire. But that's a mid-major hire where I don't know if we learned our lesson from Steve Prohm or not. Another guy that I would absolutely dream of having is a Midwestern guy from Crete, Nebraska, Dana Altman, who is, obviously he coached at Creighton. He's the coach at Oregon currently. He is an absolute dream. He is coached at Marshall, Kansas State, Creighton, and Oregon. He would be an absolute grand slam of a hire. I think he would be the absolute best hire possible. And he's always been associated with Iowa State. When Prohm was getting hired, he was up there. But I think he honestly uses Iowa State as kind of a source to get a raise from Oregon. And he absolutely deserves it. He has a record of 689-352, and he is one of the great. That would be the absolute best hire possible for Iowa State is Dana Altman. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not. But that would be an absolute home run. John Beilein, the old Michigan coach, he coached for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's too old, and that's all I'm going to say about him. He's too old. Porter Moser from Loyola Chicago, that would not be a bad hire. He has a 291-241 record, but he also coached at Arkansas, Little Rock, and Illinois State, and then Loyola Chicago. So obviously his first two places, and really probably the first couple years at Loyola Chicago, he got the living shit kicked out of him. But he's really, they obviously made a Final Four run a couple years ago. He's a very solid coach, and he's also pretty young. So we got Pat Kelsey. He's currently the Wake Forest assistant. He was the head coach of Winthrop, Xavier assistant, Wake Forest assistant, 180-94. A pretty good record, but I don't see him at all being the Iowa State coach. Another fun one where I think he would fit Iowa State perfectly, and the fans already love him, is the ESPN announcer Fran Facilla. He hasn't coached since 2002 for New Mexico, but he has 176-99 record. He coached at Manhattan, St. John's in New Mexico, and he absolutely loves everything Iowa State. As far as a personality fit, Fran Facilla would be right on par with who you would want to be the coach, but I don't think he would come out of a 19-year hiatus from coaching to coach Iowa State. I think he's made his decision. Obviously, he wants to be an ESPN analyst, and I respect that. But that would be a fun pick. Another guy that's been getting some heat, well, not heat, but some interest is Craig Smith, the coach at Utah State. He's coached at Mayville State and South Dakota, and he has a record of 225-107. He's been one of the hottest names in college basketball, winning 2 of the last 3 Mountain West tournament championships. He's picked up Coach of the Year for himself in 2019, and he hasn't really been under any notable coaches, but he has a stingy defense, and he's gotten all sorts of attention in the mid-major college basketball universe. And his team, Utah State, has won 20-plus games in the last 3 seasons. So he's going to get a big job eventually. And that's the thing with mid-majors. Obviously Steve Prohm was really, really good at mid-majors at Murray State. But how did he end up? So that's the thing. I think Craig Smith is a young coach that's going to be really, really good. And that's a guy to remember for sure. So, those are some guys that you got to think. And like last podcast, I said the Baylor assistant coach. I said the Gonzaga assistant coach. Some guys to think about. But, it is an exciting time. Pollard came out with an announcement this morning, kind of explaining, how hard it was to fire Prohm, because he is a good guy. And I just want to say that right now. As much as I hate on Prohm, as much as I complain about Prohm, he is a really good guy, and I want to wish nothing but the absolute best for Steve Prohm. I hope he can bounce back. I know Arkansas State was kind of thinking about hiring him or some other people. I really hope he gets a good job, because I really, as a person, do like him, and I appreciate what he did the first couple years for Iowa State. Whether that be with Hoiberg guys or not, he was still the coach, and you got to give him props. He gave me some very good memories. So shout out to Steve Prohm for being a very genuine good guy. But it needed to be done. I'm glad it was done. And I'm happy that Pollard made that decision. And no matter who Pollard hires, I'm going to back them up 100%. I'm going to be on their side. And I hope TJ Otzelberger, he hasn't, like I said, really done anything at UNLV. He hasn't done anything at any schools that he's been at, but he's been respectable and he's been young. Well, he's been young. He's young. He could definitely grow with the program. He's from Wisconsin, so he's a Midwestern guy. I'm not totally against TJ, but don't get me wrong. If we could get Dana Altman, I'd do it in a heartbeat, but finances are really hard right now, with COVID. And obviously the first priority is Matt Campbell and his staff. So I think it financially makes the most sense to probably go after TJ, but that's still a $3 million buyout. And we also have to pay Prohm's buyout. So either way, it's not a cheap situation that Iowa State's in, and I hope Pollard makes the correct decision, because like I said, this is his 4th hire for a head coach just in basketball, and he's had some pretty good names. And I don't know, knowing Pollard, it's TJ is an obvious one that he wants, but he might pull somebody out of his hat that you didn't think of or you didn't think was possible for Iowa State. He also made it very obvious that no donors will essentially pay the buyout for either Steve Prohm or the next coach, which I respect for sure, because that just puts on an ugly face. Iowa State fans aren't like that. Iowa State's not like that, where it almost becomes a business outside of just people being fans. And if you get the donors involved, that becomes a business. And don't get me wrong, I agree. I know that college basketball is a business, and it's one of the dirtiest businesses there are. But I really think Pollard, you got to trust in Pollard. He is, in my opinion, the best, if not one of the best ADs there is in the country, especially in the Power 5. And he has the same values as Iowa State fans. And he agrees that the brand of basketball that's been there for the past 6 years, well, I guess the past 2 years outside of when Hoiberg's guys were there was trash, and that's not acceptable. The football team had more wins in the past 2 years than the basketball team. And regardless if the football team is really good or not, that's ridiculous. So it needed to be done, and I'm glad he did it. I'm sure letting Prohm go was difficult. And it does suck that Prohm's out, just because he's such a nice guy and he wanted the best for Iowa State. He obviously didn't want the team to suck like this. But it's done, and I'm glad it's done. It's time to find somebody new. So I'm curious to see who it's going to be. I'm really, really excited. If we find out soon, I'm sure I'll do another quick podcast about the hire and, how I feel about it. But like I said, I did a quick podcast. And one last thing, Iowa State always seems to, as much as I cuss Iowa State and as big of an Iowa State fan as I am, I hate Iowa State and I complain and bitch and moan about them. They always find a way to give me a birthday present. Today's my birthday. It's March 16th. And 2 years ago, I was in Minneapolis. And on my birthday, we won the Big 12 championship. And that was a really special thing. And this year, I know it happened on March 15th at about 8 o'clock. But Prohm got fired, and that was a nice little present because Prohm is not the guy. But all I want to say is, best of luck to Prohm. I hope he lands on his feet. I hope he ends up getting a good job. But I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to find out who our new coach is, and I'm hoping we'll find out this week. Pollard said it'll be a pretty quick transition, so I'm hoping we find out quickly, and then we get to work to getting the recruits to keep their commitment with Iowa State and also try to get Kaluma from UNLV to us. So thank you for listening to another episode of State Takes. My name is Brett Stakey, and I will either see you next week or I will see you soon when we hopefully find out who will be the next Iowa State basketball coach. Thanks for joining. Have a great night. Bye.